Beh, gli Stati Uniti per tantissimi anni hanno goduto di un privilegio esorbitante, ma questo privilegio sta finendo. Sono qui con Kenneth Rogoff. Kenneth, ciao, grazie mille per essere qui con noi.
Thank you for having me, Sylvie. What a pleasure meeting you.
Ovviamente è stato capo economista del Fondo Monetario Internazionale, professore alla Harvard University e adesso ha appena pubblicato un libro, Our Money, Your Problem. So let's start from here. Can we say that, given that you were a champion in chess, can we say that the dollar is kind of the queen of the chess?
It's not a bad analogy. I hadn't thought of it, but the queen in chess is the most powerful piece. It can go anywhere it wants. It's stronger than all the other pieces, although a pawn can capture the queen if the queen's not careful.
So what do you think? The dollar peaked in 2015, and since then we've seen a decline. As for now, with Trump policies, it's the dollarization, it's accelerating. So what do you see ahead? Where do you expect to see the dollar?
But I think there are two important points. One is the value of the dollar. So what's the exchange rate against the euro, the yen? It's very high right now. And my guess is over the next couple of years, some of that's going to go away. And by high, I mean what you can purchase. You're here in New York and you can see how expensive it is. This goes in cycles, and that cycle's probably at a peak. It came off some this year, probably come off more. Another separate issue is the dollar as a tool in international trade, as a safe asset, as the reserve currency. That's a much longer cycle. And it actually also goes in waves. It wasn't just like that for the dollar. So, for example, in 1971, when Nixon went off the gold standard, the dollar fell a lot after that, the share of reserves. And of course, Europe had been the center of the dollar block. A lot of the rest of the world wasn't really globalized. And Europe, well, you have the euro in Italy and elsewhere now. What we might see this time is maybe not the renminbi or an Asian currency, but I think the Asian block's going to gradually be less dollar centric, maybe half dollar, half renminbi over time. Right now, Asia's half the dollar block. So that's really what's been going on since 2015. Now, is Trump accelerating it or is he slowing it down? And with everything about Trump, there are the pluses, there are the minuses. You have to weigh it. So just to say, there are a couple things on the plus side, just to be fair. One would be that he's pushing AI. In my view, not enough regulations, pushing it too much. He says we have to defeat China. But that's a very big deal. That dominance in AI helps the U.S., it helps the dollar. A second thing, which is again complicated, are pushing dollar stablecoins. I don't want to get off into the weeds on that. I think there are pluses and minuses, but there are a lot of things in the other direction. The tariffs, that's terrible for the dollar. In fact, if you surround the U.S. with enough tariffs, it hurts the dollar as an investment. Although it might not be obvious, there's a link between integration in trade and integration in assets. To be obvious, if you had a wall of tariffs, nobody'd be investing. But it turns out that intuition's true. So that's bad. I would say undermining Fed independence, which, by the way, the left in the United States also hates Fed independence. That hurts. The big, beautiful bill and fiscal policy. But if I had to pick one thing that's the most concerning, is he's really pressing our institutions, our political culture, trying to have so much power for the president. Now, let's say you're a Trump worshiper. You think he's great. You basically trust him with decisions more than Congress, and you say, that's fine. The trouble is, this system's worked for 250 years. Okay, you love Trump. What about President Zohan Mamdani, which is going to follow? He will inherit all of these powers that Trump accumulated. There are going to be no checks and balances. And I think having our system broken up like this, if he's successful, that's very damaging to the dollar. So there are pluses, there are minuses. On balance, I think he's accelerating it.
Well, and in fact, we are waiting for a response of the Supreme Court that could
Huge decision.
say the separation of power is still important.
This is absolutely critical. Clearly, tariffs are a tax. Trump says they're not. The foreigners pay it. Nobody, it's just ridiculous. And I think the Supreme Court is not buying that it's not a tax. And clearly the Constitution gives Congress the right to tax. But these things are very difficult. This is a real challenge. If we go back to the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt, who's a, liberal icon, he really attacked the Supreme Court. Believe it or not, a thing Americans write out of the history books is we defaulted on our debt in the 1930s. We changed the price of gold from $20 to $35. And Americans say, well, that wasn't a default. We still paid you in dollars. Well, my Argentine friends could say, well, we still paid you in pesos. What's your problem? I mean, of course, it was a default. Franklin Roosevelt wanted the Supreme Court to rule that it was not a default, that he was allowed to do it. They ruled against him, but he intimidated them by saying he was going to add justices. That idea comes up a lot. So what they said in the end was, well, it was a default, but no harm done. I mean, that's ridiculous. We'll see what the Supreme Court does here. Are they going to rule you can't do it, but we're not going to make you pay the back taxes and keep doing what you want to, but, maybe within some bounds? Very, very big decision coming up.
But speaking about which, do you fear a fiscal crisis event? And if so, when could it materialize in the U.S.?
So in my book, I predicted that more likely than not, I mean, who knows, the U.S. would have a fiscal crisis in 5 to 10 years, which would most likely initially express itself in rising interest rates and then inflation. I would now say the same thing, but I would say 4 to 5 years instead of 5 to 10 years. I mean, Trump's a very muscular, powerful politician, and he's pushing things faster. It's going to take something to trigger it. You don't get a fiscal crisis, just slowly and gradually. Usually, well, let's say our debt is very high, record highs. Interest rates are high. Another important feature of getting a fiscal crisis is having a lot of political stasis, political freezing. I'm speaking to an Italian audience. I think you don't know all about that.
We know it, unfortunately.
And then something hits and you don't have a way out. I mean, you had the ECB helping out. Yeah. If you had not, I think you would have had a lot of inflation. And the U.S., there is no ECB for the United States. And so I do think we'll have a fiscal crisis. There are no guarantees. Maybe interest rates will fall. Maybe AI will produce so much tax revenue it won't matter. Make a long story short, I think it's more likely than not a crisis.
So do you think that this is the reason why investors have seen, and this was very different from the past, this year, the stable coin and gold as a safe haven instead of treasuries and the dollar? And does it worry you?
Well, I think there's no question that gold has been a substitute for the dollar for the major central banks. That has been a big driver of why gold prices have gone up. I know there's a lot of other froth around it, but I think there's a very strong fundamental. In fact, I've been joking for years when people say Bitcoin is the new gold. I say, no. Gold is the new gold. And I had predicted this. I talk about it in the book. Even my book was finished before Trump, that gold, the demand would go up. On the other hand, these things don't happen quickly. There's not a lot of places to go. You don't have a single bond in euro, not enough of them anyway. I think there's promise if the euro somehow, the European Union somehow manages to organize a defense. I think you have to. I think even if Trump wasn't in power, if Harris had won, she'd say, I'll defend you. But she didn't want to pay anything for the military. So you're going to have to do this. I think if Europe becomes a geopolitical power, it will have a big difference in the importance of the euro, which is already coming back from where it was before the crisis.
We have to fast a little bit the pace at which we are coming together in Europe. So I just wanted to go back on gold. Do you think that it could be something like a backdrop for Chinese currency or coin? That is why they are buying so much gold?
I've heard this rumor, but no, I don't think so. Going back to gold as an idea, which the editors at the Wall Street Journal seem to like, and occasionally bring on some far extremist to say we should do it, but it doesn't work because it's not flexible enough. Yes, it would be nice if we were on a gold standard, we obeyed it, politicians never cheated, we just had a perfect system. It's never going to be. Gold may be perfect, but people aren't perfect. So, and even in China, you can't rely on it. No, the reason they're substituting into gold is they see what we're doing to the Russians. They saw that before. In fact, Russia had been accumulating gold for a long time before the Ukraine invasion. So they just want something that they have, the U.S. can't default on. And I think official creditors especially really should worry about the U.S. selective default on them. The Mar-a-Lago plan, if anyone has ever heard of it, Mar-a-Lago Accord, Steve Moran.
The new plaza.
That's all about defaulting. Its centerpiece is defaulting on debt to foreign institutional investors, just like we did in the 1930s. Scott Bessent, who is the voice of reason in the Trump administration, he supported it until he thought it was getting in trouble a little bit. There are other ideas have come up. So if you think that we have a fiscal crisis in the U.S., we would never default on you, partial default. You're crazy. You're the head of the Chinese central bank, and you're putting all your money in dollars and going to rely on that. So of course they're not. They're scaling back.
So given that we are in a back-out period, we don't have any data given the shutdowns, but we have seen a lot of layoffs from companies. The labor market seems to be a little fragile. What is your take on the U.S. economy, and especially what do you expect from inflation? Do you think that from here, given also that the AI role, we will have higher rates for longer?
Well, I think we will have higher rates for longer, and the Fed's in a very tough position because Trump will probably take over the Fed. That's my prediction. He will get what he wants at the Fed. I don't know how, but he will. He wants to lower rates. The Treasury Secretary said that they want to lower rates, but I'm not sure that that's going to be good for inflation. Inflation's been above target for 3 years. I think the tariffs are going to work their way through. They haven't yet, I think in part because companies are scared of Trump, but that can't last. They have to push through the price increases. We're going to have high inflation for the next 12 to 18 months, and they're going to be lowering rates against this. It's not a good look. So I think that's very likely that we're going to continue to have inflationary pressures. And I see the long run real rate, inflation adjusted rate, as going up, not down, adding to fiscal pressures.
And so do you think that markets are overvalued?
I hesitate to say that because whenever we have a new invention, and AI is amazing, I hear some crazy things. There was one investor, they started going, AI is the biggest thing since the internet. AI is the biggest thing since the printing press. Yeah. Then they go, AI is the biggest thing since fire. Okay, well, I think that gets a little bit of an overstatement here. And I think it'll be slower. I think it will produce growth. But right now, it's having a big effect on some firms. There's a lot of layoffs because of AI. But I wouldn't read it as the U.S. economy is doing badly. The firms are doing great. That's what's in the stock market. What's really going on is we're in an era where profits are going up, labor shares going down. So the rise in the stock market, I wouldn't read it all as growth or optimism about growth. It's optimism about we get to keep everything. we don't have to pay as many workers. And they're probably right about that. We'll see what's going to happen socially with that. So you asked, are we in a bubble? Famously, Bob Shiller, you probably interviewed Bob Shiller over the years, predicted the stock market crash around the internet bubble. But if you look carefully, when he predicted it, the stock market was here. It went to here. When the crash happened, it went to here. It was still higher than when he said it was in a bubble. And I think it's very hard to call right now. I promise you there will be a massive stock market crash in the next 5 years. I guarantee it.
Massive.
But will the price be lower than today when it ends? I don't know.
Well, this is a glass half full, I would say.
Yeah, no, what does surprise me is the markets don't reflect a lot of volatility.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly think it's possible. Yes, the stock market could go up 20% in 2026. It can go down 20% tomorrow. And you don't see that in the vol measures, which is, I don't have an answer for.
I have another question for you, Kenneth. Let's talk about the active treasury issues. We have seen some stretched and problems on liquidity and on the repo market since the treasury is focusing on the short-term issues. Do you see it scary? Do you think it's scary for you?
So Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has written that he thinks long-term interest rates are high right now, and they're going to come down. And under Trump, they're going to bring them down. And the president he never talks about long-term interest rates, but it is said that he thinks the same thing. So if you firmly believe that, why should we borrow at 10 years and 30 years when we can get it cheaper in the future? I think they're dead wrong. This is a mistake. And by the way, there's an inconsistency. You made this point before. If AI goes like this, which they would also say, interest rates are going to go like that. Interest rates are going to follow the growth. So there's some technical issues in repo markets I don't really understand. So I don't really understand why the Federal Reserve stopped its quantitative tightening. I don't really understand why they need to keep such a big balance sheet, but it's around these similar issues. But I think the Treasury itself would be well advised to take advantage of these rates now, and in a couple of years, they will be higher.
And given your huge expertise on the topic, what do you think about the US 20 billion that could become 40 billion swap to Argentina? And do you think that the peso is still overvalued?
The peso is overvalued. That's there's no question about that. Although understand there are a lot of controls and such that put it in place. Let me start by saying I think Milei is the best chance Argentina's had in many, many decades. And I'm very sympathetic to the Trump administration supporting him. And by the way, I've debated some of my Harvard colleagues and others who say it's not like the Mexican crisis. There's no cause for this. There is. You're Trump. He's your best ally in Latin America. If you're not going to help him, who are you going to help? And I think it worked brilliantly. I mean, who knew? Milei ended up doing very well. I think a lot of his policies are just very good. He's finally bringing fiscal policy into balance. I don't agree with everything. He talks about wanting to have the dollarization again. He talks about wanting to get rid of the central bank. I've told him you should have an independent central bank that inflation targets like everybody else. I wrote the first paper on having independent central banks on inflation targeting. So talking my book, I don't know that I persuaded him. He will be pragmatic in the end. So this was a very expensive proposition for the U.S. Maybe we'll lose money. We're making money on a lot of other things. I really am sympathetic to this. I think it worked out. I think a lot of people, particularly from where I come from, Harvard, just want to say everything Trump does is wrong. And I think, I disagree with a lot of things, but you have to call a spade a spade. That was a brilliant tactical move. Milei's gained time. I don't know if anyone can make Argentina work, but this
Yeah,
is the best chance that they've had.
it's very, very tough. They've been under many defaults. But Kenneth, do you see, looking at the long term, if we see the technology disruption we are in, AI, and the fintech role in the US especially, do you think it's the best response and the way to fight against China state capitalism?
Well, I'd say it's the other way around. We're winning at the current game. The U.S. dominates the global financial system. It's not just the dollar, our banks, our clearinghouses. And so I've written in my book, and actually my book from 10 years ago, why would you want to change the rules to a game that you're winning at? I think we don't. However, China and also Europe see the new technologies as a way to compete with the dollar. We're talking about competing with the dollar. It's not just, are things priced in dollars? Is oil going to be priced in dollars? It's also, where are markets trading taking place? Who is the back office? Who sees the information? And right now, it all goes through the United States. That is unacceptable, not only for China. I don't know how Italians feel about it, but many I've talked to in Europe hate that. I talked to one well-known central banker, I mention it in my book, who came to my office saying he just bought something for his wife, and he bought it in Europe, and he hates the idea that, the U.S. president can see it. And I think that's unacceptable. So I think the new technologies are a threat to the dollar and eventually will help reduce its market share.
Last question. What keeps you up at night, and what are you most optimistic about?
Well, what keeps...
An easy question.
No, it is an easy question. I mean, I think recently, it would certainly be AI. I would like to see more regulation around it. I think with social media, okay, I'm an old person. I think we did it all wrong. I think social media has so many problems on mental health, on political system. Not regulating social media, historians will view as a huge mistake. And I'm going to say the same thing about AI. Do I care in the year 2100 if AI progressed a little more slowly? Or no, I worry about in the year 2100, the future of humanity, what AI will do, how it will change civilization, people. I think, that's how it's going to affect our children. So I'm worried about that. But I would say the thing I'm most optimistic about is I'm privileged to be a professor at Harvard. I meet these wonderful young people all the time. And so far, they're still amazing.
So far. Kenneth, hang in there. I have to show the book, which I didn't bring before. So this is the new book, Our Dollar, Your Problem. Kenneth, thank you very much for being with us. If you want to say hi to our Black Box readers and listeners and viewers.
Thank you.
Mille. Thank you very much.
Thank you.